Here's my round 5 game of the day from the Biel tournament. And I've picked the encounter between Noel Studer and Etienne Bacrot. So Noel Studer, 20 years old, very young, ambitious, talented player from Switzerland. But he's rated well below his opponent, Etienne Bacrot. Going into round 5, Bacrot is leading the tournament. He's rated 27.15, number 2 in France. But Studer with the white pieces, of course, he's well prepared. And, when you're... of course, Bacrot wants to play for a win. But not so easy when you're facing someone that knows their openings very well. So, how do you do this? Do you play some double-edged opening? Do you play something you know very well? How do you do it? Well, Studer is playing the super solid Catalan. So straight away, that's not easy for Black to try and unbalance without taking enormous risk. So let's see how Bacrot managed to do this. So he played the main move, taking on c4 and queen c2. And now the main line is just to play a6, takes on b5. But white is so solid here, and it's very hard for Black to sort of shake things up. You can play bishop g5, bishop f4, bishop d2 is also the main move actually. But of course Studer will know these positions very well. So Bacrot played something a little bit unusual. He played b6. Now, when we were looking at this game live, my co-commentator was looking on the online database, and this main line of the Catalan has been played around about 10,000 times in serious games. But there are only 62 games with this move b6. Now, okay, why? What's unusual about this? Doesn't it look logical to put the bishop on the long diagonal facing this one? Well, yes, but the problem is that it was always thought that knight d5 was a good move. But in the last couple of years, there's a Russian player, Bukavshin, who's developed this line. In fact, Black can sacrifice the exchange like this. And this is quite an unclear position. In fact, Bacrot has experience with this line. I think the best way of handling the position is for white is simply to recapture. Allow the bishop to go to b7 and then just play. And white has the usual slight space advantage, and it's simply easier for white to play because Black's queen can't find a good square. That's probably the main difference. White can develop very easily, the rooks come in the middle, whereas for Black it's not so simple. But Studer played bishop g5, and I have to say I'm not so keen on this move. He played it very quickly, but I think the problem is that Black plays knight d5, Bacrot played this, and after this exchange, well, this has helped Black, because the queen comes to a good square, and the rook can easily come into the middle of the board. I'm not saying white is at a disadvantage, far from it, but I just think that Black's development, well, you can see it, is very, very easy compared to other lines. And here I think it's already, well, roughly level. Black has managed to get in his break with c5. So we reached a very standard kind of position. Here, Black has to be a little bit careful about queen a4, so he preempted that with bishop b7, and the queen came to a4 anyway. And now here, as I said, I think Black is already fine. And this is a very interesting move, quite uncompromising, just to try and start a little initiative on the queen side. Bacrot played, after 6 minutes, rook e8. Well, a very normal move, looks reasonable too. And now I think he should just straighten out things here with knight f6, and I think the position is just level, roughly balanced. But still plenty of play, of course. Instead he played a6, and it just looks a little bit funny to do this. Queen a3 is an interesting move here, typical to some kind of pin, but okay, Studer played queen a5, also not a bad move. And now knight d2. So we have this typical hanging pawn position, and well, it's double-edged. And Studer takes quite a committal decision to play e4. That's probably correct, because I think once the knight comes to e6, this is a very nice square for the knight, because it can well, it supports the centre very well. But e4 is very interesting because this obviously breaks up these hanging pawns, and if black takes here, then that means these pawns are split, and white is slightly better in this position. But d4, of course, is the move, the principal move that black should play if he wants to sort of maintain the tension in the position. And it's very imbalanced. Protected past pawn, but could c5 become weak? And also, white has this kingside pawn majority, which on a good day you might be able to press forward, but very imbalanced position, interesting position. And here, well, I think Studer played a decision which was probably a bit impractical. He played knight b3, and he went for this c-pawn straight away. He's a very ambitious player. He tries to get the maximum out of the position, which is very laudable, but perhaps it would have been better just to blockade that pawn and put this knight on a nice square. And Bacrot actually thought he was slightly worse here. I wouldn't be quite as pessimistic. I think it's still fairly even. But knight b3, as I said, very ambitious, gunning for this pawn, but somehow it's slightly shaky position. In order to have a chance of capturing this, and to prevent c4, in fact, white needs to blockade with rook c4. But this is risky. You can see that after Bacrot's move, rook d8, excellent move, going behind the d-pawn. With this rook off the back rank, suddenly this move d3 introduces very dangerous counter break or counter idea, and the rook is simply misplaced off the back rank. And you can see that with the white pieces over on the queen side, then the king is a little bit neglected. Bishop h3 would be the way to try to win this pawn, but well, d3 is already interesting, just giving up that pawn, and black could simply play knight g5 and knock the bishop back, and either come back or play something else. So anyway, rook d1 was played, and well, understandable, trying to take care of this d-pawn, but this gives Bacrot a big chance. f5, and suddenly white's pieces just look like they're on completely the wrong side of the board. All the play is switching to the king side, and black's pieces are very harmoniously placed. First thing is, if pawn takes pawn, then knight g5 is terribly strong. Suddenly threats of taking and queen e4, and it's an absolute disaster. So rook e1, and we had a general trade on e4, and now a really strong move, very subtle, queen f7. It's a lovely move. So this introduces the threat of knight g5, hitting this rook and hitting this very unfortunately placed rook on c4. These rooks are split. Rooks like to act together. They like to work together. When they're split, there are often problems. This is the theme in this game. So, yeah, if knight d2, protecting both rooks, actually knight g5 is still incredibly powerful. The rook goes back, and then knight f3 wins material. There's going to be an overload here. So queen d2, the queen rushes back, but black's initiative on the king side is still incredibly strong. Yes, imagine if this rook were back on the back rank, it could protect here, but I'm afraid white's pieces, the rooks act as single units. They don't act well together. So queen f5 means that knight g5 it would be protected. Also it attacks the rook. So the queen came to d3. Rook f8, hitting the pawn, and also with the threat of knight g5. So f4, and now Bacrot just blasts open the position with g5. This is incredibly powerful. And you can see that white's king is just getting opened up here. So Studer tried somehow to hold the position together with queen f3, and after takes, h4 prevented knight g5. But now, of course, squares on the g file are very weak. King h8, and then rook g8. So the knight came back, but this is desperate defense. White's king just looks in dreadful trouble. In fact, well, the players were running very short of time here. Bacrot had an immediate win with rook takes and rook g8. Rook takes. So black has sacked the exchange. And now, very nice winning move. I mean, I think there are lots of moves that win here, but rook e3 is beautiful. Once again, dare I say it, exploiting the fact that these rooks are split. Here, you can't protect the rook with a rook to the e file. So after takes, I don't think white's king is going to last very long in this position. But Bacrot was running short of time, and it's very hard to calculate these kind of variations. You don't know how much time to invest. So instead, he made a move that just looks very solid and, well, also, prepares some interesting things on the f file as well. The rook came back. Now, queen h3 is probably very strong, but instead queen f6, threatening this pawn. Rook a4. Trying to get this rook into play, and again crashing through on the king side is terribly strong, because if rook takes knight, then there's absolutely no defense to all the threats here. For example, queen e4, g2. Checking doesn't get you very far because black can block, and well, everything is threatened here. All these moves, and that would be out. But again, calculation is very difficult, and under such circumstances, when you're short of time, you tend to just kind of hold the position. Black is, after all, a pawn up here, so Bacrot wasn't risking anything. He just wanted to keep this rook out of play. Fair enough. But he took it a little bit too far, because suddenly white has counterplay. In fact, black should still take on g3. He played f3. Looks incredibly powerful, but actually after queen e5, white can actually survive in this endgame. But, well, Studer, also short of time, played the reflex move, preventing f2. He just played king f2. But now, black is back on track with this move, knight d5. Very powerful. Suddenly this knight is winging its way into white's position, maybe via f6 to g4, sometimes even knight e3, sometimes knight b4, but also knight d5 cuts out any potential threats on c5 as well. And here, well, white is still lost. They staggered through to the time control, and now knight b4. Last move of the time control. This is just a winning move, actually. There's no decent defense to knight d3. Well, you can see either rook can take, but knight d3 is very strong. Could play a rook a3, preventing knight d3 check, but then c4 is very, very powerful, just reinstating the threat of knight d3. So Studer played rook e6 and rook g6. That got traded. Check. Bacrot recaptured. Still completely lost because actually these pawns are too strong. Rook takes pawn. f2 check, and now just knight takes b2. Two connected passed pawns are just way too powerful. After rook a3, c4. And those pawns are marching through. Well, I like that game very much. I'm a fan of the hanging pawns. You often get them from Catalan positions, Queen's Indians, Queen's Gambits. I like these openings very much with black. And that was a classic illustration of how this particular structure with the pawn on d4 might look as though this pawn is weak, but actually the pawn on d4 often gives black tremendous attacking chances because it kind of splits the position in two. So there we go. After that victory, Etienne Bacrot still in the lead after 5 rounds with 4 out of 5, a half point ahead of Ho Yifan. So they go into the rest day with, well, Bacrot leading, and they have 4 rounds still to play in the tournament.